Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a brand spanking new episode of Pumpkin Emoji. As always, I'm your host, Rodrigo Borges, alongside the ever so handsome and informative Jeffrey Koval.
He always drops handsome.
I mean, you are handsome, my dude. You're one of my best friends, and you're handsome.
Let's introduce our guest.
Yes, let's do it. We are joined today by horror royalty that are Nick Braccia and Mike Monello.
Hello, good evening.
Hey, we're here. We're decidedly less handsome.
Jeez.
Okay,
See, that's what you do, Rod. You put them on the spot.
No, come on. They're royalty. Royalty is just naturally more handsome than just handsome. Right?
the royal handsomeness.
Exactly.
Well, anyway, thank you guys again for joining us on Pumpkin Emoji.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your presence.
Rod is going to be playing his zombie game once again. But I guess, we can jump right into it.
Yeah, it sounds...
Your guys' major project out right now is going to be Video Palace, the book version of that?
Yes.
So it's funny because once we talked to our friend who helped us arrange all of this, I was reading a couple interviews you guys did, and my friends were huge fans of Joe Bob Briggs's The Last Drive-In. So we're on Shudder all the time, and I'm like, how the hell did I miss the whole podcast about the Eyeless Men and this book coming out, and then that you guys were involved with it, and it was like almost tailor made for me how that's the stories came about, and now the process of getting it out there, and I have it ordered on Kindle right now.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks for ordering it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard because it's a podcast, and Shudder is largely a video platform. So, the app itself isn't all that conducive to listening to podcasts. But so I think what's interesting about Video Palace and what I've noticed is that there seems to be a consistent stream of people discovering it all the time. And I look at the reviews on Shudder, and I see just generally every week there's a couple more reviews added. So it's been interesting to see how the Shudder users have come across it.
So the podcast itself is it still ongoing? I know it came out about 2 years ago, or is that a contained story?
We launched around in our, excuse my memory. I feel like it was just in time for Halloween 2018. And it ran for 10 episodes, ranging between 18 and 30 minutes. I think the average episode's about 22 minutes. Right. And that was it. It was a story that was both self-contained, but also kind of begged for continuation, expansion, exploration.
So now, was the Eyeless Man, was that something you guys came up with, or did that have origins elsewhere? Was that an internet creation or a completely question concept?
That's there's all sorts of ways to answer that. Depending on how devious we'd like to be. The Eyeless Man was our creation. The origin of the podcast and the podcast narrative came from, Mike and I have known one another for over a decade, and have worked together in both personal projects like this and at the agency he founded, Campfire. And we had been talking about doing an original IP. We've been talking about audio. And as we started to, evolve and build out a story world, a narrative, we had our concept, we had kind of our I guess I would say milieu around the kind of video, video fandom, media, collector culture, those sorts of things. And it was out of, looking to various places for inspiration, and out of our conversations that such a character was born. Anything to add to that, Mike?
No, that's pretty good. I mean, our desire was to create something that felt like an urban legend, and that felt like something you may have heard about or or seems like something maybe you just missed out on, but that was common knowledge. So the fact that you asked the question shows us that it's working on something.
Yeah,
no, absolutely, yeah.
Exactly.
No, and all the marketing and the art I see around the project as a whole, and for the book itself, it definitely gives that air of like familiarity. Like I know recently I've been re-binging all the old, well, I say old, maybe less than 20 years old, found footage movies, and seeing that kind of style, come and go, and like all the nostalgic type of like movies that are becoming popular now. Like there's this one movie my girlfriend and I just watched called WNUF Holiday Special, and it's shot like it's like if somebody left a VCR, a VHS recording on like a local cable station, and the whole story is between like these goofy, car dealerships and this actual, paranormal investigation that's going on. So I think it all, like that kind of vibe is very popular right now for good reason. People like slinking back into that feeling.
Yeah, I think there's I think we always have a desire to revisit kind of more treasured moments of the past, and I think in particular the concept of media formats in particular that are no longer at the height of their popularity are, for some reason, there's just something that feels a little odd about them, like they're from another world. I remember the period before vinyl really seemed to make a comeback for more hardcore music fans.
Oh, sure.
And I played a record for my kids. They were young and they grew up in a world where they'd never seen a record, even though I had them. I never played them because I was already streaming music digitally by then. And when they were old enough, I said, hey, come here, check this out. And I pulled out a vinyl record and they looked at it like, what is that? And then I put it on the turntable and dropped the needle on it. And this is the first time they had seen a turntable. And like I said, kids who are used to saying, play this song, and then it plays, because I dialed it up on my phone or my computer back in the time on iTunes. And when I dropped the needle on and music started coming out, they had this look on their faces, both of them, like I had performed some kind of black magic.
Right.
Like, to them, it was the first time they had seen the power of some kind of, what's that shiny black disc that holds music. And I think there is a kind of a power to that. It's the idea of even, it's funny to think about, but VHS and people being nostalgic for VHS covers. Because today we don't get any covers.
Yeah.
You can go on like eBay or Etsy, anything right now, and people are legit just selling remade printed covers for the old N64 games or old VHS covers. Like there's enough of a want to have that. Maybe it's just like the tactile feel to display something that you really like.
Yes.
Well, also, people put a lot more thought into things back then. I mean, I got my first console in '81. It had been like playing, like the box art was what you had to go by. Posters are what you had to go by. There wasn't media all around. We had 12 channels. I remember the Haunted House game for Atari 2600. I got that because of the cover. I still I can render the image of that cover in my head. Like stuff made impression. And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot more effort and care were put into art, because they didn't have 78 different marketing channels and collateral and yada yada. Like the key art, the main art to market and contain a product was a big deal.
Sure, right. Even a little later on, I remember getting the Game of the Year edition for the Elder Scrolls Morrowind, and like including a whole like half-an-inch booklet of information about the game and like a world map. And like you still see that stuff now, but it's always like like an extra like pre-order bonus. It's not something that's just assumed to be there. So I think there was, whether it was just a poor business decision or like a genuine appreciation of it, I do agree. There was, that did exist out there.
Yeah,
there was also a sense of discovery too that comes with it. Like
that's a good point.
Is that when you bought a record or a CD, even there was a good chance that at best you had heard maybe one or two songs from it, and the rest of the songs you just never heard. And when and you just had to buy it and take a shot. And same with movies. Like when you're at a video store, all you had to go by, to Nick's point, was the cover and the description on the back. And so when you brought it home and watched it, you didn't really entirely know what you're in for. Whereas today we have so much information, or even the ability to, just stream something first to see if you like it. We have access to so much that it's highly unlikely that people stumble on something accidentally. Usually they know enough going in. But in the VHS days, you'd get something, and so many movies were missold. Like you think you're getting something that's like a more comedy horror, and it turns out to be a video nasty.
Yeah.
Right.
You get these kinds of back then you might have called it a ripoff, but now I call them opportunities to discover something different. Which was.
Oh, what is that one studio? We're not going to badmouth them, but they make their living off of, like, when like Transformers came out, there was like battle cars or something. Like
Asylum Studios.
Asylum. I was going to say Pinnacle.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
Didn't they do
like
Atlantic Rim? Like they did Atlantic Rim.
Like they were 10 years after their glory days, I think. So 10 years after, when they would have excelled at that kind of stuff.
See, there's something that I think it was Nick that mentioned it. This nostalgia for times once, times past, and there seems to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be this surge of not just memes but also content surrounding this specific concept known as the back rooms. This idea, of this elegiac. Is that the proper?
I'm not sure.
But it's this idea of a room that just feels so alien and nostalgic at the same time.
It's like liminal spaces, right?
Yes, absolutely. So there's something beautiful to me that there's this resurgence of VHS and whatnot. Personally, I did live the VHS stuff because here in Brazil everything got here like way later. So I, spent upwards of like 7 years, 8 years, 10 years of my life just using VHS tapes all the time.
Well, I mean, I think everybody has that story of a Friday night, after work, after school, you're going to Blockbuster and you're going to browse the stacks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and when you guys were just discussing all that with the art and the discovery of it, I think that's kind of a nudge into why like the type of storytelling that we're so into in various ways. Like that's kind of, it's not like necessarily marketed or a commercial result of that, but I mean, I think that's kind of like the best way to find these types of things. Like you're not going to find a DVD cover about an ARG that's going on.
Yes.
You're going to have to be like, it was like what Mike was saying about everybody having access to trailers and information about the movies. It's like going into these types of projects, whether you're consuming them or making them, it's almost like the more ignorant you are going in, and more blind you are going in, the more fun you're going to have with it.
Yeah, in some ways, that's the great challenge, right? It's like, how do you give people enough to make them intrigued to want to join?
That is a $1 million question.
Yeah.
We all, when we make things, we still want more than anything else for other people to experience them. But so how do you ride that line? I mean, that's something that we, at some point you lose control of that, and people are either going to, take it and share it or not. And I've been on both ends of that spectrum, like, in the case of Blair Witch, where people took it and shared it so much, it was became a massive cultural phenomenon. And then other projects where you kind of go, boy, why didn't this one take off better?
Right.
This is the one I really cared about.
Yeah. So I do appreciate the fact that there is a bit of agency in the people who are experiencing something as to whether it actually finds additional audience or not. Because I think, to me, that as a creator, it makes you a little more beholden to the people you're making it for, rather than, say, the studios, or, you realize that as a creator, you want people to love it so much they share it, because in many ways that's the only marketing you're ever going to get.
Sure.
And so, whereas I think in the past, sometimes it's been when your project is funded by a studio or when it's just funded by other people, there's often other things you're paying attention to when you make something. You know, somebody's idea of what is of what mass audiences want, rather than satisfying a certain, you know, group of people that you're making it for.
Yeah, sometimes you might be more, like you said, beholden to a campaign, you know, or some sort of commercial result, rather than neatly wrapping your story up. I'm sure there's stories out there that you guys might even have been affected by, like you didn't have the time to really develop what you wanted to because, you know, this was an assignment basically.
Oh yeah, always. Yeah. I mean, sometimes though the guardrails can make for better work too, though. They force you to come up with,
oh yeah,
you know, with good ideas, be resourceful.
I mean, yeah,
like
resourceful,
lightning around. You gotta make do sometimes.
resourcefulness due to limitation.
How Jaws happened. Jaws would have been like a remote control shark chasing guys, and then you see the shark for the whole movie.
Exactly.
Instead, we got like three amazing actors like arguing, and it was way more fun.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
One thing about the nostalgia of video pals, I mean, our main character, Mark Cambria, you know, he's a videotape collector. He's obsessed with this stuff. But one thing that was important to us was to show, you know, the two sides of it. Like, as someone who's both a pop culture, you know, maven, and certainly a media consumer of high order, you know, there's some stuff about the nostalgia movement that I can sometimes find cringeworthy in myself, and certainly within culture.
Mm-hmm.
People going nuts for Goonies, or just like the straight, like, just no reflection version of like content consumption. And it's just I feel like it's not always a good and it's something where we as a culture are not, I think, both speaking about America, but also I think globally, there's not enough enough reflection on that. And we wanted, you know, Mark Cambria is a character who's he's caught the collector bug, and he's got this love of VHS tapes and movies, and certainly is nostalgic for a time watching them. And it is his downfall. He's kind of an arrested individual in his life and relationship, in part because of his his kind of like reverence. His love of that stuff sort of paralyzes him, and he's completely oblivious to that fact. So that was, I think, you know, we thought there would be some tension and some horror to be born out of that conflict, that obliviousness. So that plays a big part in how I think nostalgia influenced the horror aspect of our story.
Personally, I'd say it worked. It absolutely worked.
I mean, even though this came out originally a couple years ago, I think it gets more like existentially, you know, hollow, and it lingers on you now. With, you know, we just spent the world collectively 8 months, you know, locked inside, and it's like, you know, if family's getting on your nerves, or if you're alone, what else do you have but your, you know, collections? And it's like, I like see that inkling into the whole insanity aspect of it. It's like, or not necessarily insanity, but the obsessiveness of it.
Yeah, part of the story was, and we spoke about this, I think, in an interview around the time the podcast came out. There was an episode when I was a kid of Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories, and it was called Gather Ye Acorns, and Mark Hamill was the star. So he's a couple years, like, probably not too far past Return of the Jedi, so he's still quite young. And the episode was set in the 40s, and this character, I think it was the 40s, might have been the 30s, but this character, like, is obsessed with, like, his kind of, like, amazing cool car he has, and all of these, like, trinkets and collectibles, like his stuff, like all of this material, like media, tchotchkes, whatever. And his parents were like, "Get your shit together and can I swear in this? I didn't ask about that."
You can absolutely swear as much as you want.
It's all good.
We swear all the fucking time in here. Don't worry about it.
I usually swear quite a bit, but I don't want to trip a wire
It's all good. Don't worry
get
about it.
Bezos over my house.
Twitch account gets
So-
shut down.
So in this episode, he runs away and just lives out of his car with all these toys, and then eventually, like in the 80s or whatever, he's an old man, and he sells them all for like ridiculous amounts of money, and like it seems to be that it's telling you like, haha, he stayed true to himself and he won. And as a kid, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. But as like, because I had a million Star Wars characters and Mark Hamill was like a god, but
It was justifying it, you know?
yeah, watching it as an adult, you're like, wait a minute, I think they got this mixed up. I think the parents had a point to some extent, and there comes a time where one largely has to grow the fuck up, and Mark Cambria was someone who was struggling with that.
Interesting. Yeah, no, it's definitely like, I mean, not to get too deep on the into a gaming podcast right now, but it's definitely true. Like, enjoy what you like and chase that dream, but you need some sort of reality net there to not be the Mark Hamill living in his car selling Funko Pops.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Funko Pop is exactly. Oh god, talk about like a.
That is honestly the best. Like, yes, you hit it. You hit the nail right on the head.
Well,
Funko goddamn Pops.
Conspicuous consumption.
Yeah, it's a good, easy target for that type of conversation because they're harmless little plastic things, but they piss off everybody. They piss off, people who like the diehard collectibles. They piss off people who are like, why are you wasting your money on that? And it's like how they existed for as long as they have. I give them credit because you type it into Twitter, it seems like people are only screeching about them.
I mean, I've got, I just gave that spiel, and I've got 3 Funko dolls on.
Oh yeah, no, I hate
them. But that's the thing, right? That's the thing. Like you look at Funko Pops, and if you don't have any, you're like, oh god, these are so fucking stupid. And then you see one of them, and you're like, okay, but this one, I like the character, and it's okay. And you go ahead and you buy one.
Yep.
And then
WWE's The New Day. Well, I got to get all 3 of them now.
Exactly. I love Alien. Well, there's a Xenomorph. There's a Xenomorph drone, a Xenomorph warrior. I gotta get the Xenomorphs.
Yeah. The outfit Kodo. You need them.
God.
Gotta buy them all. South Park.
Right. And the thing is, it's not to say like, oh, you shouldn't have fucking hobbies. It's like the real world doesn't care if you have the whole set, man.
I think it's just like surface level, like it's superficial, and that's okay. But I want to go back and watch that. It's a part of the Spielberg.
Yeah, you can find it on YouTube.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome.
Gather your acorns. I mean, there's a thin line. You never want to look in the mirror and be like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a guy in a Doritos or Mountain Dew commercial who's like way more excited and lost inside of this contrived moment. You don't want to relate too much to the guy in the fast food commercial. I think it's a good.
Yeah.
And I think that's also another part of the whole, like, again, the vibe or aesthetic of these types of stories. It's when I was just just going into undergrad and learning about found footage movies, like it was just when they were blowing up, and like obviously Blair Witch really set it into motion, but like the mid 2000s and 2010s, they were pumping them out because they were cheaper to make, usually not necessarily better. But in my mind, like we talked about it in terms of gaming at that point, I wasn't interested in the next Call of Duty coming out. I wanted the next Amnesia or something indie at the time, like Minecraft, that nobody had like the guidebook to. So these weird stories and happenstances could creep you out on them. Like I remember there were scary stories written about people playing Minecraft and seeing
Herobrine.
Yeah, like invisible characters in the game and stuff. Like I didn't care about what was considered. Again, I was a freaking undergrad in 2010, so I was insufferable. But
we all were.
I just wanted all that, really weird and on the fringe type of stuff. So I think like now, like we have my one friend really likes collecting steel books and like the newest Blu-rays and everything. And every time there's the Criterion collection, he spams the links into our group chat. And I
Yeah.
think that's great. But I think like that other side, that vibe I was talking about, that's the marketing that worked for me. Like stumbling upon it in some crappy message board, or like the one weird friend you had in a creative writing class is talking about something on social media. It's like, what is that? That's what I think. It might be wrong, it might be unfair, but I think you see like the surface level Funko Pop for the next Call of Duty coming out versus you have no idea what you're about to get into. That second option is always going to be, to that person I was at the time, much more appealing to me.
Yeah. I feel that's like a common theme with like creative.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope so. Otherwise, we might need to find a different hobby or career path to lean into.
Yeah.
Well, it's about really just self-awareness and what does one get out of the thing. Your buddy with the Steelbook DVDs, might just really, really love movies. That could be, his passion, but there can be growth through that, so long as they're not all, terrible movies. I also highly recommend that if you're over his house to rearrange them, because I'm sure he has them.
He might literally drop dead.
I think that's always
fun. I think there's always this for me, and I have a collector bug for sure. And what's happened to me over the years certainly is you realize like I have to get more specialized in my collecting, because it makes no sense to collect it all. There's no point in it. And so you start to zero in and find kind of really what you love, and then you focus on collecting that. And I think that's there's a bit of hyper specialization that gets in there, that can be fun, but also what I find my path tends to go hyper specialization, and then kind of like you've explored every avenue of that thing you love, and then something else starts to come in the off the side of my peripheral vision and go, oh, what's that? Maybe I should start on that.
Yeah.
So you keep collecting, but I find for me that it is a source of there's a source of learning that comes with it too. As I change, as I shift, as I get more involved in something, I become I have more expertise, and I look at things a different way, which I enjoy. And I find that once I stop being able to look at something in a different way, it's when I've kind of gone as far as I can go with it.
Sure, and I think just whether it's actual movies people are buying, or trinkets, or a band T-shirt, you just want to it's ownership of that experience that I think everybody's really just looking for. Whether it's just a goofy little desktop thing, or like a painting that was in the background of this famous movie scene that the person dropped thousands of dollars on. It's just saying that like me as a person, this story being told, or this music being played, this is important to me, and I see myself reflected in that. And tying it really back to the big conversation broadly about ARGs, I think like how much closer can you get to the story besides being in it? I think that's kind of like what drew me to the whole genre, and I think we're all drawn to that in various ways as creators and consumers of it. You're not going to get much closer than seeing yourself on that screen, or in that chat log or whatever.
Having a character interact with you.
I think in a way, I look at that and I go, really, what we're talking about is that sense of immersion.
Yeah.
You get right that, and I do think, when I think about my best movie going experiences, or my best, my favorite books, I was able to achieve that same level of immersion in those things, where I just forgot where I was and was totally engrossed in either the movie or the book or the game, that I was, and alternate reality games became, I think, the idea that as a creator, you can surround somebody with the story like that, and put them in the center, made it that much more immersive. And I kind of feel like when we talk about when we talk about a kind of storytelling, like first person films, which tend to be what these found footage movies are, also have a way of doing that, because they tend not to break that wall. And it kind of breaks down, like when you're watching a movie and there's editing and there's music and you could be immersed in it, but you're still conscious of the movie. But when it's done as a found footage, if it's done well, you kind of feel like you're watching a document of something that happened.
Definitely.
And it falls in. And I think when you look at like with Video Palace, our intent even in the podcast stage was to, we knew the podcast had to tell a story and there had to be characters, obviously, but the goal was to make it feel like the world was bigger than the characters, and especially the mythology was bigger than the characters, which is the same thing that I think we all tried to do on Blair Witch, right? Is create this massive world and then tell a more intimate story in that world. And I think when you look at creepypasta, it's the same way. It's like there's a world out there that you can play with, and your imagination, whether you're receiving something that a storyteller creator made, or whether you're creating it yourself, there's like all of this ability to tell unique stories in the world, and the stories expand on the world, and the world helps bring immersion to the stories.
I mean, one could say that about the SCP Foundation in current terms, like this idea that it's this collective sort of universe world where anyone can add to it with like a general set of guidelines and rules to how the world.
Are you guys familiar with that?
I'm not.
I'm not either.
It's
So-
kind of like, yeah, Rod, you got it.
Okay, so the SCP Foundation is basically, imagine if Men in Black was real.
Video Palace too.
Yeah, Men in Black, but it's run by the Dharma Corporation, like the people that controlled everything in Lost, or Cabin in the Woods. You know how that like there's that huge place with all the different monsters from all these different horror ideas. They are all contained inside of this like facility.
Oh,
yeah, that's
I am
SCP
familiar with this.
Foundation.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's kind of like creepypasta by committee by wiki.
Yes,
It's like a shared story world.
Yes.
exactly.
Is it sort of all tonally congruent? Like is it all kind of like goofy, or does it mix up?
No,
Or?
they're not totally congruent, but the idea is that all types of stories are able to be told. There are some goofy ones, but normally the way people go with it is like very serious, very fucked up stuff that, this shady organization that literally controls the world does while trying to protect mankind, or under the guise of protecting mankind.
Mike Anderson says it's Lovecraft as told by documents created by paper pushers.
Yes, absolutely. That is literally what it is. Jesus.
So it was made for Mike Anderson. That sounds perfect. What's it called again?
The
I'm gonna write
SCP
that-
Foundation.
SEP.
SCP. Secure, contain, and protect. That's the motto.
Okay.
It took me about 6 years to realize that that's what it meant, stood for.
Oh, it's been around that long.
It's been
I might
around
be
for a long
exaggerating,
time.
But yeah, no, it's probably at least the 2010s.
Yes.
Cool.
Like I remember late 2009, blah blah blah.
Something.
Mike, it was interesting when Mike was talking about immersion and found footage. Over the last 3 years, I found what I've gotten really into the screen life subgenre, with Unfriended 2, Searching,
Host.
Host.
Yeah.
But what I find amazing is I cannot watch any of them on my big glorious television. I have to watch them on my laptop.
Yes.
But I love watching those movies on my laptop, but I can't do it on the TV or in the movie theater.
No, I totally get that. There's a certain level of intimacy that it requires.
I saw somebody post they were in a Zoom call with their friends watching Host. I'm like, you can't really beat that. Like in terms of immersion.
Yeah. There's this really interesting analysis that H Bomber Guy does. Harris, I forget the rest of his name, but he does this analysis on why VHS edition of Alien is better than any other edition of Alien, because it's so dark and muddled and it's so hard to see what's going on that the alien could be anywhere. Whereas when you're watching Blu-ray or like a 4K version of Alien, it's like, oh, okay, well, the alien's not there right now, so I don't have to be worried that they might be. But back in the VHS, it was like, oh shit, they could be over there, but the quality's so bad, I can't see anything. You know,
like you said, it adds to the immersion. It's like you're going to be claustrophobic because of the medium you're watching it over.
Yeah, and the TV was small, so.
And I guess what I was saying before, linking back, something like SCP to your guys' work on Video Palace, I read that in creating the book, it was kind of a more collaborative effort instead of, you guys going through story by story, writing it yourselves. So I think someone mentioned like a loss of agency once your story is out there. Did you ever worry about that in this process?
No, I think what's interesting is that the the process of creating the book was, and I don't know if this is just a common thing that editors do, or if but Nick and I, coming from kind of the marketing industry, right, through Campfire, and seeing and being in a position where with the work there, where we might be extending stories into physical spaces or non-traditional spaces like Westworld and Game of Thrones, Man in the High Castle, things like that. You kind of get an understanding of the space in which you can play, right? Because the show and the showrunners have their story that they're going to tell, and you have to be in a supportive role. And I think over those years, I think we just kind of got smart about building a world around stories. In our case, for marketing, and in marketing, when you're working with teams, you've got to generate ideas really quickly, and sometimes it can't be as organic as you'd like when it's our own personal work. Mm-hmm. You get used to clients either briefing us or having to take what they want and then turn it into a brief for other creative people to come in and work with us. And so the process for us was very much like writing what we would call a creative brief on the world of Video Palace, which gave enough information about the podcast. I think almost every writer, honestly, if they hadn't heard the podcast prior, went and listened to it before they wrote the story. But it's still, we included enough information about Mark Cambria and story, and enough information about the larger world, like the Eyeless Man, the Stack, a little bit of what these things are, to give each writer a grounding in the world. And then we also gave larger parameters, like the fact that if we were to call Video Palace a subgenre of anything, we call it media horror, right? And so with all that information laid out, we were able to kind of what we would call brief in the writers, say, here's the sandbox to play in, and within this sandbox, within these ground rules, we want you to explore any story, personal story, cultural story, any kind of story that interests you that can work within the sandbox. And we said our responsibility, our duty is going to be to work with you to make sure that what you're writing is consistent with the world, and that if you in some cases, if you try to kind of push the mythology in a direction we hadn't yet pushed, to make sure that either, yes, we're okay with that and that's going to work for the larger mythology and the plans we have moving forward. So it was a combination of giving the writers a sandbox as well as much freedom as possible.
That's excellent.
Yeah. I would say we were more, I can only speak for my anxiety around it, but I was way more focused on them adhering to tone and theme, and the outlines and really the direction and guardrails that we provided there, than with plot stuff. They came up with lots of interesting, congruent ways to expand the world narratively. It was making sure everyone was on the page stylistically, so that the what is really an anthology or collection, but all in the service of telling this one big story, held together. So
Right.
that was a bigger concern, and we got very, very lucky with the. I mean, I'd like to think we set them up for success to some degree, but we just had tremendous writers who did a great job taking direction and really like putting their own spin on it.
Right. So stylistically and plot-wise, you were able to make it work. You talked about how you were able to make it work. But my question is, and I think this is, this is something I don't know if it's just me, but I'm a sucker for like very specific or very vague mechanics to a world. So when it comes, for example, to Blair Witch, one of the biggest discussions that I've ever had with my friends is always like, so what are the rules? How does one survive the Blair Witch? And the fact that there are certain hard elements and some vague elements to it makes it so that you can set it not in stone, but you can set down some ground rules as like, the most accepted one being like, oh, don't look at her, don't make eye contact with her.
Oh yeah.
You're asking if are there a lot of rules that even if it's not clearly defined that are important to them as the creators?
Right. What I would ask is more like, is it important, do you think, to set those rules for something, paranormal like that, especially because, the fact that the rules are not clear or people seem to be following their own rules in each of these stories, does that detract from the story? Does that add to the story? What do you feel is, not the right way to go, but what is your preferred way to go when it comes to the system?
That's a really good question. Mike, you go first.
That is a good question.
I defer.
I think that to me, right, what I think is important is that the rules and the consistency are less about tactical things like how does the eyeless man work, and more about like what brings the eyeless man out in the first place, and what is the eyeless man attracted to. And then, of course, there's a bigger mythology about why, what purpose does the eyeless man serve? But I think, initially in this stage, we're kind of, we're just kind of getting to know the eyeless man, right? So it's less about how do you defeat this thing, because the Blair Witch has never been defeated.
Yes.
And but Blair Witch is also Blair Witch is a franchise that doesn't really have a strong creator at the center, unfortunately, right? Like those us original creators, we haven't been nearly as involved in any of the other stuff that's come out since the first movie.
Right.
So, there was a Bible written. I don't know if they're using it, but it seems like every film and every filmmaker gets to kind of, even if they try to adhere to it, they get to kind of write their own rules,
right.
Like for us, it was like the Blair Witch was something that only came about every somewhere between 40 and 60 years. But already that rule has been smashed by the various things that have come out since, right? So, but with Video Palace and the Eyeless Man, there is a sense of there is on our part, like I think we know. And you always use the word know because it's possible as a creator, it's possible to deviate as long as you know where you've been, what you've done in the past, and where you're headed, right? So, but I would say at this point, we know generally what the Eyeless Man is all about, what brings the Eyeless Man out, what the Eyeless Man is attracted to, and so those rules are pretty standard. And even though the stories are all different types, and they take place in different areas and different cultures and even different time periods, there is a consistency, and we don't tell you and we don't point it out. It's not like Zombieland where we go, here's the rules, but
if it was so easy.
Yeah, but you definitely, as you read the book and as you listen to the podcast, like I feel like those rules are pretty clear. They come out a lot more clearly in the book. So if you
Right.
read the book, you should be able to ascertain a lot more about the rules and probably go back and maybe even reframe how you see some scenes from the podcast.
Yeah, there's a subreddit. There's a guy with a subreddit who's working on that as we speak.
Oh,
That's
yeah, there
amazing.
you go.
Which is
I
always
love
cool to
that.
poke. It's always cool to poke in on, and
And that kind of thing is only possible if there are certain rules that you have in place and that you're consistent with. And the most important thing really is that the world has a consistency. So like there definitely have been times where we thought we had a rule in place and then we decided to change it, but it was okay because that rule never actually led to anything being forward facing, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you go forward, as soon as you establish something that's forward facing, then it becomes real and it becomes a hard part of the world.
Right.
And
so
so
it
it's
becomes a
keeping
hard
track of
rule.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say when we worked on my biggest project, which was Everyman Hybrid, which ended 2 years ago, it involved the Slender Man, a couple friends, blah blah blah. Our thing that we thanked ourselves, we went into this as again those insufferable kids in undergrad, but we luckily threw ourselves like a wide net and gave ourselves kind of like you said, it wasn't front facing rules, but we knew what we wanted to or not want to have it be a component of the story. So I think just like early on, you never want to cut away a potential for something that you could use, for the better at the end. Like you don't have to paint yourself into a corner if there's no reason to rush to that sort of established lore or to make yourself look like you're contradicting yourself later on. Play with it first if the project is going live, but you don't have to set anything in stone until you're ready.
Right.
yeah, rules. I think rules are interesting. I mean, there's as Mike was talking, I was thinking about it a little bit. I mean, there's something like the Final Destination series, which has a real clear-cut rule. You cheat death, death's going to find you and get you in the most creative way possible. Like
Right.
that's it. That's the whole series. The whole series is the fulfillment of the rules. And you've got there's the meta serial killer movie rules and the sort of thing that can get lampooned in a movie by it's like Scream, which the parodies of the rules have already been going on for decades. But then I start to think about something like Candyman, which is one of my favorite horror movies, which begins with the most old school hook around rules. No pun intended. There wasn't. So seriously, wasn't a pun intended.
We'll dock you for that one.
I pun a lot, but that one was not on purpose. Anyway, it starts with the Candyman, a la Bloody Mary, and as intriguing as that was as a marketing hook, it really doesn't have a whole heck of a lot to do with the kind of amazing themes and content of the movie. So I feel like rules can be the entire thing or the least bit of the thing. But I think that you can. I guess Final Destination's the exception to the rule, which is you should never let the tail wag the dog. You should never let rules you create push you into a story that's not great in order to service these rules you've set up. That's backing yourself into a corner.
Yeah. No,
Oh, sure.
I see that.
I think there's a level of to play with there too. That's like you can screw around with like the appearance of rules, like if you're going like the meta, serial killer. If the audience is expecting something, one of my favorite taglines regarding this is like my very popular book in this genre, I guess, is House of Leaves. And people always say, I think there was a famous either interview or at a meet and greet, the author said something along the lines of, the genre is horror, but at its core, it's a love story. It's like you can use the rules of what people are anticipating of a horror monster movie or a killer movie. And it's like they can have rules in their mind, and you can completely blow them away because you're playing a different game.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. I mean, I would say the theme of or technique of subversion of genre, of expectations of anything is something that's paramount to the work Mike and I have done together, both professionally and personally, and that
Excellent.
certainly that he carries on at Campfire.
I just got distracted by Rod creeping
Yeah,
into a dark
me too.
building.
I just got into a jackpot of stuff.
I see. You got a lot of laundry
Yeah.
detergent.
Ah, well, you know, win some you lose some, but
You gotta clean. You gotta clean clothes.
well,
Cleaning, doing laundry in the zombie apocalypse.
Or are we
I
doing
need
shots?
I need some of that. Look at me, look at me. I'm covered in blood right now.
You look like
Could use some
what was
laundry
the
detergent.
Pokemon? You look like Ash. Ash has seen a couple tough
Got it.
years on the road.
Gotta kill them all.
This is an MMO.
No, this is
Okay.
it's a simulation game basically.
Okay.
It's like it has very, like I was saying, it has very hard rules to how the zombies function, and it just places you in there with no objective other than to stay alive. And it's like it counts how long you've been alive. Okay, watch this. There's gonna be a key in there.
And is there
There's no
permadeath
key.
for your character, or there was
Yeah.
that? I got into that. There was a game on Xbox 360, State of Decay.
Yes.
I really enjoyed State of Decay.
I was actually I had thought about playing State of Decay for this, but
yeah?
I realized I didn't have space for it.
There's a sequel, right? Didn't the sequel come out?
Yes, it's way better than the first one.
Oh, I didn't play it. Yeah, the first one was pretty jank, but it was still. I mean, I had a great time. The idea that once your character dies, you got to take over another NPC.
Yeah.
that's
On this
something.
one, it's more like you die, it's over. You go, you start another game, and like you have very like skills that take a long time to build. Yeah, I've had this
Wait, so
character for a while now.
If you die in the game, you die in real life. That's the hook.
That's the biggest rule.
Yeah.
God damn it!
There was a text-based zombie MMO like just before the whole zombie wave swept, like with Walking Dead and whatnot. You know, however
Was
many
it?
years ago. I forget the name of it, but when I discovered it, I was really young, so I had no idea what I was doing. But it reminded me a lot of like the old school like message boards and stuff because everything was turn-based and text-based,
Yeah.
and there was a pretty dedicated following to it. But I think at its core, it's kind of just like if you're going to put a world and a story out there, it might not be a huge audience, but there will be an audience for it somewhere, and people will get dedicated to it.
Yeah. I'm really glad, and I mean, indie games certainly push this. I'm really glad that isometric has come back in the last 5 or 8 years or whatever.
Yeah,
Like,
I used to play Fallout when I was a kid. I hated it because I could never finish it.
the old ones.
Yeah, Fallout 1, man. My
I think
dad had a computer that could run it when I was a kid. It
the
was
isometric
really difficult.
shadow runs are really good.
Yes.
The Valerian games are really good. It's like,
I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 just came out. And it's
Yeah, I have
technically
it.
isometric.
it is. Yeah, it's. I think it's fair to call it that. Yeah, I watched I created my character and watched the cinematics, and I haven't gone back to it since.
that sounds like how I approach new games.
Yeah, I've
Like,
my backlog is embarrassing, but I
Everything
decided
old is new again.
I owe it to myself to finish Divinity 2 before I start Baldur's Gate 3.
I highly recommend you do that.
I've
highly
played the
recommend it.
first act of the game 4 different times on like 4 different machines.
Yeah, sounds accurate.
Well,
So
we can wrap up here pretty soon, but just one thing that personally in tonight's conversation that I was encouraged by was it sounds like a success that you guys had with working with writers that weren't previously under the wing of the production, and maybe a year or two at this point. I would say, like, on the surface, I'm a pretty big Doctor Who fan, but like I only know the modern ones. I know Chris Eccleston and David Tennant and a couple of the newer ones, but I know nothing about the old Doctor Who. Like, if I were to say I'm a Doctor Who fan and they showed up on like a Doctor Who subreddit, they would exile me. But I had, I wouldn't know anything about the old stuff. But I had a friend. It sounds like a truck is going by. Sorry. I had a friend or a longtime viewer of our work who approached me and said, "Hey, I got the rights to write an anthology for one of a beloved side character from like the Sixth Doctor's 10-year or something." I'm like,
That's awesome.
That sounds awesome, and I really appreciate you coming to me. But I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I have no idea what who this character is. XYZ. But then they provided me, it sounds similar to what you guys did, kind of like a starter kit to the lore, the character. And I wrote it. I had a story in mind that was loosely sci-fi. I'm like, yeah, this could work in the world of Doctor Who. And I wrote it. They absolutely loved it, and like it ended up being one of like the anchor pieces to the anthology.
Oh,
So I think I think that's just really encouraging. Having experienced that and hearing how it seems to have worked out for you guys, it's kind of just like if you set your team up, whether they're immediate team members or people not literally off the street, but people you're bringing into the project, you can find success. So I think that's kind of like a don't be afraid to work with others type of mantra, because I know
Absolutely.
Personally you get very protective of your story and you want to see it flourish, and that might include being xenophobic with it. Sometimes it's like you can welcome people into the fold and have fun with it.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Oh yeah, that's there's a lesson that I think that I have learned from that has carried true from Blair Witch to the work that I've done with Nick and such at Campfire, and that is that in a strange way, the story itself acts as a bit of a sandbox, right? Like when we were doing Blair Witch before the movie even came out, we had what today I think people would call fan fiction, but they were people made sites and they gave themselves characters in the world, like they were conducting their own investigations. And this was when all we had was a website with some mythology up. We didn't have, people didn't have access to the movie yet. And I always thought it was remarkable how well those stories, with no direct collaboration on our part, fit in so often because when people are moved to kind of create within a world, whether they're doing it as a fan or whether they're being brought in, once they decide to create within that world, I think there's an element to where the world is well enough established that people sense it. Especially storytellers, they just sense it, and so you find that it's not as difficult as it may seem to hit that. And I found more often than not, like when we've been lucky enough to work with a property that has lots of fans and they begin to create something, that more often than not they always hit to some core truth. There might be one or two things, and then when you have the luxury of creating in the guise of an urban legend like the Eyeless Man or the Blair Witch, you find that it's okay. Some inconsistencies work, right? Because urban legends have inconsistencies,
exactly.
Right? And that works, and that often works in its favors too, as long as you're careful about what's inconsistent and what's consistent. And so it's kind of an organic thing, but the story itself tends to be the guide that most people need.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's kind of like, it might be a little different with like established IPs and something with like literal millions of fans that's already out there. But I think especially when you're starting on the smaller side, or like you said, working with like something like an urban legend, I think even if people are engaged in it, and even if they don't 100% know exactly what you're going for, I think the fact that they're interested in it enough to, dip into that, whether it's, like role play or fan fiction or whatever, they're going to pick up what you're putting down. They're going to be, there's a reason they're so dedicated to your work. It's because, maybe not the exact story that you're telling, but like the tone of it and the world that you're building, it's there, and they can find that common ground and, whether right or wrong, create on their own with it. And it's pretty interesting to see.
It is. It's very fulfilling.
Yeah, that's a better word for it.
Okay, we have been here for an hour so far. I think we're good to wrap it up.
Yeah, no, we'll
amazing.
We'll let you guys go. Rod is being cornered by zombie. Oh no, he's a way out.
Yeah, this is the first time I don't die at the end of Pumpkin Emoji.
Yeah, the running gag is he'll always like be caught in a dead end. Or I remember the very graphic one of the Resident Evil remakes. It was a very gory death, and we were sitting at like an hour and 15 minutes, and he died, and I think he was just stunned, and we're all sitting there looking at the viscera on our screen. I'm like, well, I guess that's as good as time as ever to call it now.
I'll do a thing where I get surrounded by
you were just
zombies
saying, no,
on
you were
both
just saying
sides.
character.
Here we go.
Oh
Here
my
we go,
God.
boys. Oh shit!
I thought you said you had him forever, and you just.
It's
throwing
okay.
him
It's
the
worth
wolves
it.
at us.
Yep.
Oh,
There we go.
consumed by the horde.
There we go.
That's straight up like the original Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
The one scene with the motorcycle guy that falls off as they're running away.
Tom Savini. Yep.
My guy's gonna turn into a
Absolutely.
zombie in a second. Check it out.
So for people in the stream and you guys with the Halloween coming up, I think this is this is public, so we're not spoilering anything. But I see you guys have similar panels on Halloween itself through Shudder. Is that right?
Yes, I was part of a panel with Ed and Greg, who Ed was co-director and co-writer of Blair Witch, and Greg, who's a producer with me, and three folks from Host. And in our panel, we
Wow.
talk about found footage, and kind of how they've changed and adapted over the years from Blair Witch to Host.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So I'm
Where
looking forward to
can
that.
where can we watch that?
Well, that was just announced today. It's going to be on Saturday. It's going to be on Halloween on Saturday, and there's a schedule for Shutterfest, which I think you can find in their social channels.
Okay, sounds
Facebook
awesome.
or Twitter. Yeah, and I'm sure they'll reveal more. There's a lot of other panels that are going on all day long, so it should be an interesting day.
Excellent.
Rad.
Yeah, even before talking to you guys, and my friends can attest, I'm such a shill for Shudder as it is. Like such a good streaming service, a lot of fun stuff on there.
It really is.
And it brought Joe Bob Briggs and Darcy back into a rotation, so can't get enough of them.
Indeed, yeah. It's I love in particular the foreign films that Shudder gives us access to.
Oh my god, I don't think I've watched a single bad one yet.
Yeah.
Oh god, what was the one? The Tigers Are Not Afraid, or some other?
Yeah, Tiger's Not Afraid.
Yeah, that was a trip.
Yeah.
All right.
Terrified is a good one.
We do have a small little tradition here in Pumpkin Emoji. Both of you are to choose. I think they each get a death, or do they get one
I
collectively?
think they can choose one because I think it's almost definitely going to be Mike Anderson if they're choosing randomly from the chat. So
Okay.
we choose a viewer to be sacrificed to the Halloween god, the Pumpkin King, just because 'tis the season and all that happy stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. So look in chat right now for who you would like to sacrifice. Choose a random name.
Or just choose Mike Anderson.
Yeah, that is also, you could do that. And not
Yeah.
because we find it hilarious.
It's only the rules of our established horror universe that his hubris got to him, and now he's suffering for it.
Yeah, I think it's got to be Mike Anderson. I don't know. What do you think, Nick?
We only get to kill him once.
Oh man,
Let's make it a good one, though.
we'll get a good one. So yeah, in the wrap-up tweet, we'll show the classic horror death that will befall Mike Anderson to call the Pumpkin God. Well,
So I like calling him Mike
Oh.
because usually I call him Michael.
yeah, that might just be my
Hold on.
my shorthand because we've chatted together a lot, but we've never actually verbally spoke. So that's something you miss out on.
Same.
The thing I want him to tell
Same
us in
here.
the chat, though, is if he's going to be sacrificed, I want to know which of his amazing suits he's going to wear.
Yes.
That's
Is he a collector of fine suits?
he is a
He is.
he's a sartorial marvel.
That's amazing.
God. All right. So let me bring him here into the studio. That's a lie. There's no studio. This is just my room. We're going to send him into the studio and perform. Here. There's a lamp. I'll just hit him over the head with it. I'll do it again. Hold on.
Shittier and shittier every time.
Yes. Hold on. I need to. You can pick him up and bring him back
Is
to
he
life.
falling on the floor now?
Yeah. Ugh.
The rainbow
Falling
suit
for
is
the exit.
ruined.
It's a mess.
Hold on.
Everywhere.
Jeff, do you have a baseball bat?
No, I'm fresh out.
God
But
damn it.
Just kill Mike and we'll clean up
another
after. Nick and Mike, I appreciate this so much. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us in the spooky
Yeah.
season.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.
Check out Video
Anytime you wanna
Palace.
talk, we're around. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, right on.
Thank you so
You'll
much.
probably regret that with the Twitter mentions and everything, but
And let us know what you think of the book. I know you said you had it. Pop
no, right on. I'm looking
Absolutely.
forward to
Everything good, bad, and different.
it. Sure.
Oh, here goes Michael Anderson through the window again. There we go. All right, thank you so much for being here for Pumpkin Emoji. We love you all. Nick, Mike, thank you so much once again. And yeah, we'll see you all
Thank
later.
you.
Take care.
Take
Happy
care.
Halloween.
Happy
night.
Halloween.
Bye-bye.
Happy Halloween.